and I said, look, the relationship's a bit flat right now in terms of passion and excitement and spontaneity. Ever since having this conversation and giving myself that space to process and Amelia the space too, and it's just so much better, which I then know will obviously spill over into the other areas that take it from feeling flat to the next level. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Powerful Man Show. I'm your host, Tim Matthews, and I am with the very multi-talented, amazing Mr. Doug Hall. How are you, Doug?
I'm doing great. What an introduction, man. I'm doing better now. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I always love these conversations you and I get to have. So it's always a favorite part of my week. So I'm always amazing whenever you and I are recording these.
As am I. I look forward to it. We get, a lot of times I wish we would just record when we start these because, as people listen to this, we probably talk for 20 minutes before the show starts and we could probably talk for, 20 hours going forward, which is always great synergy going through.
Yeah, it's always great. So it's my turn to flip the script. I've got a question for you this week.
Uh-oh.
And it stems from something that I've been going through personally over the past few weeks and some tough conversations I got to have over the weekend. And also something that has been coming up a lot for the men within the inner circle, as you will know. And the question is, what do you do when your relationship hits hard times?
Well, that's a great question. And, I'm going to give you the answer of don't let it hit hard times. Right? And I'm going to start there and I'll go back to the actual answer or the question at hand. And the reason I'm starting there is because my relationship, so I'm married, 41, been with my wife for 8 years, but not married that long. That's how long we've been together. And we've gone through a lot of struggles. We went through premarital counseling. We went through marital counseling many times, and went through a lot. In fact, we got to a point, which I don't talk about publicly, but I will here and share it with the men. And you're always so open with everybody. But we got to the point where both of us were literally interviewing or getting ready to, I don't say interviewing, but we were both investigating or looking into divorce lawyers. Right? We were at that stage where we were going, okay, well, maybe we're going to pull the trigger and end this relationship. And obviously nobody goes into a committed relationship, especially a marriage, with the idea that you're going to get divorced or separate. But here in the United States, you look at the statistics and, there are over 50% of marriages ended in divorce. And in certain areas, the area I grew up, which is Orange County, California, I think that number is closer to 65%. So it's really large. And we think about this, right? No two people go into a union of any sort with the idea that you're going to be breaking that bond, breaking that relationship. And so what we've learned over the time, and the reason I say is don't get into those hard times, what we've learned really were tools and things that you're aware of too, Tim, tools that allow us to pull ourselves out of the muck, almost instantly when we get in it. Now, we still get in it. We still get in arguments. We still get in fights. We still have what's even worse than arguments and fights is that level of disconnection, right? That kind of level of, you're sleeping next to somebody, but they're 1,000 miles away. And that feeling going through it. And to that point where, Tim, you and I coach men at the highest level possible, but I have a coach, right? My wife and I hired an intimacy coach. And we didn't hire one because things were going wrong. We hired one because things were going right. And we wanted them to continue to go right. And so we invested in our own personal growth. And I think as men, especially, women are better at us for some reason than this. But for men especially, we don't address the problems until they become problems, right? We don't actually we fix things. We're good at fixing problems. Or, you hear about this if somebody asks a question or says, hey, gosh, I'm really tired. What's the first thing you think about? Well, did you do this and this and this? We go to solve mode and how can we help you fix it? And so what my wife and I have learned over time, and me being a much slower maybe learner than her, is let's go in front of this, right? History repeats itself, unless you recognize or change the patterns. And so what I'll answer that question again is tell the men that are listening to this and share it with you is when things are going right, that is a time to invest in yourself and in your relationship. because you're only building a stronger bond between each other. We invest in business, right? You and I talk about this a lot. We run successful companies. We invest a lot of money in our businesses. We never would think twice about that. We invest in vacations and massages and taking care, taking our ladies out to dinner. And it's a nice dinner, right? We take them out, we treat them well. But how often are we investing actual money and time in our relationships? And when you think about that, if I were to survey most of the people listening to this and I asked, what's the most important thing to you in your world, in your life? It's my friends and family, it's my relationships. Yet I would bet if I look at your bank account and this is something you talk about, Tim, that I love. If I look at your calendar, right? Show me your calendar, I'll show you your priorities. You can say the same with your money. Every dollar you spend is a vote, right? And so how often are you voting for your relationship? Not buying gifts, but actually investing in that intimacy, the things that build upon that relationship. So that's a long-winded, preamble to what I'm going to get into. And obviously, in talking to you and right now in this conversation, but also to the men that are already in the mud, right? You're already in the hole. So, that doesn't help. But hopefully when you get out, because you'll get out of it, then you want to be in front of everything, right? As much as you possibly can. Just like in business, you stay in front of it by investing in things before they become problems. You don't want to be putting out fires in your relationship, because if you're putting out fires in your relationship, those exact same fires somehow, some way show up in your business. Somehow, some way they show up in your health, right? They start to crumble. Your energy is drained in your business. Your wellness may start to slip because you're not sleeping as much, or you're worrying. And whether you go to the gym or not, you still have that stress. And your body handles stress the same way, right? Emotional stress and physical stress are no different to your body. Your body actually chemically handles it identically. So that's where I'll start with. And I know the question you asked wasn't related to that really, or I guess it's related, but it's not the exact answer that you were looking for. But that's where I would start telling the men, is be more forward thinking with it. Now.
Yeah, you're going to continue then. Go on. I'm interested to hear what you've got to say.
Yeah, I could talk about the subject for a long time, because for a couple of reasons. I was in so much pain because I was always in this state of being in problems with my relationship. And I was in so much pain that, and you know me well, I'm one of those people that I'm going all in to learn, to fix it, to deep dive. I took courses, I read books, and there's probably not a book or a video course or maybe even a teacher that's out there that I haven't studied with or from in some way, shape, or form. And my wife was the same way. So I'm very lucky to have a partner that was equally, if not more, vested in her growth in this area. So when you're in the muck and you're in the mire, and you're kind of, things are going, you're having problems in your relationship, you're not seeing eye to eye. If there's a specific complaint coming out, the one specific thing that's nagging you, and I'll use Amelia because you've mentioned your girlfriend. You're in a committed relationship with her. You've mentioned her before on the show, and not that she would do it, but if there's one thing that's bothering you about her, the first thing I recommend doing is going through Byron Katie's The worksheet. It's simple, it's easy, but like all things in life, because it's simple and easy, it's easy not to do. And for people that aren't familiar with that, she has a thing called the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet. And if you go into the Activation Method Facebook group, request to join, go to the resources section of that group. We'll put that worksheet in there for you guys. Definitely worth going through. Tim, you and I should probably do a training around that, because there's some ways of working through that effectively. But it's one of those worksheets that when you're upset, it's tough to go through, right? I know you've done it before. It's really difficult because you're like, why won't she change? And it really causes you to flip the script. And in doing that, I find that it gives me another point of view. And, you and I have talked about it before, is when you're in a problem with your relationship, you see one, maybe two options, right? So if you have one option, you have no options, right? Because there's no one thing is not an option. If you have two, those aren't really options. It's an or statement, right? I either do this or I do that. So there's always three options here in any situation. And what I find with men when we talk to them, they're almost always in the this or that situation. It's human nature. So what's the and? What's that third option for you? What's that third possibility? And oftentimes in the relationship, what it is something really small, and it's actually what's causing you to be upset. And I might not be answering your question exactly, but what might be upsetting you in the situation has nothing to do with your partner. And this pissed me off so much when I figured this out. I mean, it literally took me like a year to get over it. I was so pissed because I just didn't want to accept it. But what it has to do with typically is something going on inside of you. And you recognize it in somebody else, and it's your partner, and it triggers you. And you react, right? And then you get into this loop of escalation typically. I know for Erin and I, my wife, we'll get into this escalation loop, and we've named it, right? We've named it, we call it youre, right? Someone says youre. And then, we have a thing where we actually supposed to stand up and try to move our bodies and shake them, right? Just shake it out, and it's hard to do in the moment. But even when someone says youre, you're kind of you can get upset, but at least it's a
triggers you.
well, it triggers you again, but it also is like, okay, am I in this pattern? And our pattern was, and still is, right? We're always in this pattern. You don't just lose the pattern, but you do gain clarity around these patterns. And my guess is what happened with you and Amelia and what happens to the men are similar patterns that keep repeating themselves. And they're different, right? They show up differently. But if we went to a whiteboard and mapped it out, they're similar. What happens with Erin and I, for example, is she wants to do something like, go out and be social or whatever. And my immediate reaction is almost always no, right? And then she gets upset, right? And then I get upset that she gets upset. And then she gets upset because I'm upset. And then she gets distant and pulls her love away from me. And so when she pulls her love away from me, that triggers within me that I can't trust her. And then when I can't trust her, I pull away. And now we have two people who love each other going in opposite directions, trying to protect themselves. And the reality is that just keeps escalating until somebody calls it out. And then we realize what the real hurt was, is she was asking for something and felt misunderstood or felt that I didn't take time to listen and consider her. And what I felt was that she was being unreasonable and not considering me. But when we sit down and actually have the conversation, take a couple breaths, it's almost laughable. And we're able now, thank goodness, to turn that trigger around within seconds. And again, we chose a name called youre. My wife actually chose the name and I agreed to it. It works. And what we try to do now is name these patterns as we discover them. And that allows us to identify the patterns rather than being accusing the other person. And so what we would do in that situation is we don't blame, say, you did this, and that's why I got upset. It's, you know what? When you got upset, I felt my fear inside of me was that you were pulling your love away. And what that really made me feel was insecure, and that made me scared, so I pulled away. And nobody can devaluate your own feelings. And then she would do the same thing. And I'd be like, oh, I was, if she says I'm hurt, well, the truth is I never really want to hurt her. I love her. And I think most of the men can relate to this in some level. Now, obviously, I'm trying to condense these two parts, right? Doing things, prepping before and what happens when you get into the muck in a very short period of time. This is why we're doing for the Powerful Man Group, the Inner Circle guys, we're doing a whole retreat on relationships alone, and where they're going to be able to bring their partner and discuss these tools, because there's no more important relationship in your life than your intimate relationship with your partner. And it's so worth investing in. I can't emphasize that. Hey guys, I wanted to interrupt this episode because I wanted to talk to you about how almost 300 men are already taking control of their lives. They're 4Xing their business revenues, and they're having more connected, intimate sex using the activation method, all without sacrificing their relationships or their health. Now, this is only an 11-minute case study we put together just based on all the feedback we've gotten from you listeners. To get the case study, all you have to do is go over to thepowerfulman.com /11. So that's thepowerfulman.com /11. And you can get that case study right now. It's short, it's right to the point, and it's going to give you actionable points that you can take right today. All right, let's get back to the episode.
So many things that came up for me as you were speaking there. I'll try and remember all of them. I was making notes and scribbling, trying to keep up with it. But one of the key things I think you said, and maybe the guys listening, men or women, are familiar with this, but one of the key things, and I found that this was one of the things that was creating friction in mine and Amelia's relationship, and that's love language. I had started to love her in the wrong way. I'd started to love her in a way that was convenient for me, I would probably say. So, we've been through quite a big growth phase over the past 6 months with The Powerful Man, as you're aware. And I have chosen to step to the line and invest more time and energy and so on. So the things that I've then done for Amelia have been where it's a little thing like I'll be at her favorite coffee shop and I'll take her back a smoothie without her asking. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, she's really going to love this. She always says that I don't really pay attention lately and I'm not thinking about her. And, she's going to love this. But in terms of love languages, that's acts of service. And Amelia's love language isn't acts of service. But my fallback, whenever I start to get busy, well, productive still, but work starts to consume, get busy periods in work, my fallback tends to be things like that, acts of service. So Amelia then doesn't feel that she's receiving the love that she wants because her love language is quality time. And obviously then if I am working more personally, it's not even about the amount of, it's not quantity of time, it's quality time. So if I'm there, but I'm not there, if I'm not looking after myself, I'm not meditating, I'm not doing the decompression that we teach with the activation method that allows me to switch off from my work day to then be present with her, then I'm not fulfilling her love language. I'm not meeting her needs. But in my mind, I'm not going all out, to be honest, but in my mind, I'm making an effort. These small things with acts of service in the moment seem like a big deal. So if you're listening and you're not that familiar with it, then I'd highly recommend you check out the free love languages test. Again, you can go into the activation method group. It's in the resources section there. It's a really easy and useful quiz that you can take that allows you to understand what your love language is, and also you can understand what your partner's is. And obviously you can make sure your needs are met. Now, the other caveat, so I did the judge your neighbor thing. The weekend when all these things were surfacing for Amelia and I just wrote down on a sheet of paper. I just wrote down everything I was thinking, all the judgments. She's this, she's that, she's the other. I just wanted to get it all off my chest. And then beneath it all, I wrote, how do I do these? And how am I this? And I looked at each one of the judgments, at how I did that, or how I was that. And it definitely takes the sting out of it, for sure. But in my opinion, and it's a great exercise, super, super useful for sure, and I'd highly recommend checking it out. In my opinion, there's a bit of a caveat to it, which is, and this is the question to you, Doug, how do you go through the exercise, take the sting out of it, and realize how you do those things or how you are those things without then tolerating and sacrificing your own needs or desires in the relationship? Does that make sense?
No.
So here's the thing. So what I mean is, let's say that I wrote down that Amelia is lazy. Let's just write that down. Say I wrote that. And then I looked, okay, well, how am I lazy? Well, sometimes I don't do things around the house. Sometimes I do this. Sometimes I do that. But, there's also an element, whatever you write down, there's an element of truth to it, isn't there? Mm-hmm. So if you're then constantly finding how you do those things or how you are that thing, then what's going to happen in my experience anyway, what can happen is that you then don't address that thing and it keeps coming up, because what you've then done is accepted it for what it is, because you can see the gift in it, which then means that, okay, I won't judge you for that thing, but then it's still a thing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So then you tolerate because you see how you do it. So you tolerate it because, well, how can you pull her up on it if you do it? But it still remains a thing. Does that not make sense?
Totally get it now. Yeah. And I battled this for a year, as I said, doing this worksheet. And the thing that helped me out, and for those that aren't aware, one of the exercises in the worksheet is, as you said, is you turn it to yourself, right? How do you not do it, right? I am lazy when I XYZ. But then you also say, you find evidence for the opposite, right? Amelia's not lazy because she takes care of the dogs. She takes care of me, da-da-da. Then once you have, what I found to work is once you've had that list. Now, these are different parameters in relationships, right? Every relationship has different layers where you can do different things, right? What level have you developed that in? So when I first started doing this, first of all, I kept blaming, right? I'd do this list and be like, but yeah, Amelia's lazy, or whatever it may be. And like you're saying, so what I would do, my evolution, Tim, was what I call cleaning up my side of the street first, right? And it's kind of the idea of don't throw rocks if you live in a glass house type atmosphere. So the analogy or the visual that I have is, for my wife and I, is we have two different houses, right? Each person lives in one house and we're on a street. And her house is messy. Like the yard's not kept, there's trash everywhere, and it drives me nuts to look at it. However, I can't say anything until my yard is immaculate. My house is completely well kept. So it's not tolerating her house. You kind of have to, but you got to fix yourself first and lead by example. That's step one, right? Take charge of your own shit. Before you start, it's easy to blame other people. It's easy to turn outward. And especially when we're stressed, especially when we're tired. And businessmen, right? Our job is fixing things, and we want to fix other people. And it's harder to fix ourselves. So that's step one. Now, let's say you've done that. Doug, I've done that. I've been working on myself. I've cleaned my yard. I'm not going to worry about that. So I call it my side of the street. The second step, if you're open to it, is then approaching your partner. So I'll use Erin, my wife, in this example. If I was saying she was lazy, and I've had that story, to be honest, that she's lazy. And she's definitely not. But what I would do then is say, hey, look, I've been working all day and I'm just stressed and tired. And when I came out here and saw you sitting on the couch, what it made me feel was I felt underappreciated. And when I felt underappreciated, then this is what was happening for me. And in that instance, I would share a level of vulnerability to what was going on inside me. When I saw you sit on the couch, I felt made me feel underappreciated, which then I got really angry. And when I got angry, I pushed away from you, and I don't want to push away from you. So I apologize for that. Right? In that sentence, I didn't blame her for anything. There's no blame. I'm still letting her know that this is what happened, but I'm letting her know and sharing what happened within inside of me. Right? So that's level 2. Level 3, which is the level we all want to get to, right? So you can address that problem. But you can't get to level 3, in my opinion, until you've mastered level 1. And then after mastering level 1, which is cleaning up your own side of the street, then you go to master level 2, right? And trust me guys, I have tried to skip 1, 2, 3, go right to 3 so many times. That's why it took me over a year to figure this out. And to come to 3, then you share that, and then you can address and say, hey, look, what's showing up for me in my story, because it is a story, because you're creating it, is that you're lazy. And I want to talk to you about ways that we can work in partnership. And this is what would work for me. Would that work for you? And now you can have an open, heartfelt conversation. Because when you go in there with you are lazy, you're accusing somebody of something. One is you're making up a story, right? That's your story, they're lazy. 2 is you're accusing them of doing something wrong. When anybody accuses you, what's your first reaction? Defense, right? And then, especially for us guys that tend to be a little bit more in the alpha stage, right? Our women tend to be more alpha. And, high achieving men attract high achieving women because high achieving women are only looking for high achieving man. Like women don't date down, they only date up. Men, we will date down a little bit, but the idea is our women are going to be more. So typically if you go out, accuse them, they get defensive, then it turns to aggression or hurt. And now in my situation, Erin may push away from me, which then may show up for me being more lazy or not willing to address the conversation.
I love what you're saying. And do you know what? That's kind of the flow of what went down for us recently. So obviously I went through the whole level 1 of writing down the judgment. How do I do this? And then I was like, okay, so what do I want to change? And there was some, before we have these conversations, there are some points that we write down. And one of the points that I wrote down that I wanted to bring up on this point, in this conversation, was being able to communicate honestly without guilt. And, when Amelia and I were experiencing this conversation where we're both coming clean about how we felt, she said, well, I'm fine then. I'm just going to leave. Shall I leave the dogs here with you? And I'll pack my stuff and, I'm going to go stay away for the weekend. I'm like, okay. And she said, so she started to get some of the stuff together and she was about to leave. And then she was like, so you're not bothered that I'm going to leave? And I'm like, to be honest, no. And it really hurt her. And I didn't mean for it to upset her, but it was it wasn't that I didn't care. Of course I cared, but in that moment, I wanted my space. All day she'd been asking me questions and for me, I really want to get my facts straight. I've been in that position where I've been reactive and I've said things and they've not been right. There've been judgments, they've been blaming, they've been, all those things we just spoke about. So I learned to stay silent and just ask for some time. And that's basically what I was doing through this day. I was like, I don't know what to say right now because I want to get clear in my own mind as to what's going on and how I feel and where these feelings are coming from, So that then led us to the evening. And that's when obviously then she was like, okay, well, I'm going to leave for the evening. And you don't care. And I'm like, well, no, because I needed my space, like I said. And then what I came to realize in having that space and being able to communicate honestly without feeling guilt, because part of me wanted to say to her, no, I want you to stay, because I didn't want to upset her. And, I wanted to stay. But I just got to the point where I had to be honest and I had to trust what I felt. So, that then led me to being able to have the space and figure out what was going on. And what I realized, Doug, was I'm a really loving guy. And I love affection. I love intimacy. And the thing that had been lacking on my side of it, well, for me, the thing that I felt had been lacking was that level of intimacy. I didn't feel very appreciated. I didn't feel like my efforts, you know how it is. I didn't feel like my efforts were appreciated. I didn't feel like I was... simple things, hugs, kisses, words of affirmation is my love language. And then I think physical touch is my second. So I'm a very affectionate guy. And I think, like I'd forgotten Amelia's love language, I think she'd just forgotten mine a little bit too. So in terms of two people being very in love, but feeling very hurt and wanting to protect themselves and going in opposite directions, that's effectively what was kind of going on for us. But what then happened was Amelia then came back that evening. I've been in relationships in the past when the woman leaves and within 10 minutes they're phoning you and phoning you and phoning you and you're just like, oh, give me my space. And one thing I love about Amelia is she's very strong and independent. So when she left, she didn't ring me and she didn't howl me. She respected the fact that I wanted and needed, in some respects, that space to breathe and to process and to understand what was going on. And when we did speak a few hours later, ended up coming back, which was great. And we had a really great conversation. And I was vulnerable. This was the whole level 2 kind of thing. I said, look, what I've been feeling is that I don't feel appreciated. affection. I'm a loving guy. Whether you want to call that feminine, whether you want to, nah. And I started to feel like, oh shit, how's she going to take that? A guy saying, I'm an affectionate guy. Give me some kisses. So I was vulnerable. I let her see a side of me that I don't think she's probably seen before. But she then had a choice, didn't she? She had a choice as to, okay, well, do I want to give him that level of affection? Yes or no? And then we then started to talk about different solutions. Do we want to get a relationship coach for a little while to bring in some accountability, really, to the relationship? If we both say we're going to choose something new, then do we want to have somebody to support us in that container so that we really step forward with it? We came up with some other cool ideas as well. An appreciation jar. I picture it like a little advent calendar. We don't have to write anything in there, but there's, let's say, the color green on a post-it for Amelia, blue for me. And as you go about your day, and somebody might do something that you really appreciate about them, just write a little note, fold it open, pop it in there, and have it in the kitchen or something. And I may go in the kitchen tomorrow morning and see a note, and I'm like, ooh, I've got a little note. Take it out, and that's just a cool, nice, tiny little gesture that I personally think will work really well. Then we set up some other things around date nights as well that we're going to use, a jar system around that as well. As we have different ideas around date nights, we'll write them on Post-its, pop them in there, and we can set the date nights together. And do you know what, Doug? One thing that I also said to Amelia is, I don't know whether you've experienced this, but I said, look, do you know what? Sometimes I'd like you to take me on a date. She's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I'd love for you to take control of date night from time to time. And take me out and, just take control of it. Because I think, we both have a lot going on, of course, but it's also not, I get the whole thing of date nights and date your woman and take her. I get all that. I really do. And I'm all in on it. I also think it's important for us as men to also have the light being shined on us as well from time to time, rather than always being the provider and the giver. And sometimes it's time for us to receive. And if we only ever receive by doing things for ourselves behind closed doors, then it always remains behind closed doors. I think it's really important to be able to bring that into the relationship. So it's a lot more of, not necessarily 50-50 on the date nights, but there's a little bit more there. I think for me, anyway, that's really important. So anyway, coming out of the conversation with Amelia, we made some great choices, and we're in the process of still implementing a lot of those. But since then, the connection, that's the best way. Because I was honest with her. I said, look, the relationship is flat right now. We've got a good relationship. We haven't got a great relationship at this level. It's been very easy for us to have a great relationship for the past few years. We met, went traveling together, and, it was very easy for us to have a great relationship. And now as we set up base in Leeds, and there's other, it's more of the whole, I wouldn't say it's a 9-to-5 kind of structure, but there's, it's a lot more of a home-based structure. It's just the next level. We've both now got different needs. We've both up level. We've both grown. It's time to readdress what's important to us both, and then obviously achieve that and create that together. So I was very open and honest without guilt when I said, look, the relationship's a bit flat right now in terms of passion and excitement and spontaneity. And we both love those things. So how can we create that? And all that comes from connection. So as I was saying a moment ago, ever since having this conversation and giving myself that space to process, and Amelia the space too, and we came together, had the conversation, made the choices, first and foremost, the connection has been so much better. Just tiny little things. Like it's just so much better, which I then know will obviously spill over into the other areas that take it from feeling flat to the next level. So, we've gone on. We could go on for a long time, I'm sure, about all of this. Is there any final words that you wanna share with the men or women before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I mean, I wish we had someone to summarize all the cool points that you just put out there, but we are on time. And just to summarize, men and women. One is all areas of your life. All the most successful people have a coach. You just see this over and over and over again. And Tim, you and I coach men specifically at the highest level, and they have coaches, and that's great. So if you're listening to this and you don't have a coach, get one, period. Find one, and it doesn't have to be us or anything else, but find one. And then also men and women, but I'll speak to men specifically here, is get ahead of the curve. If you're listening to this going, wow, and I bet everybody listening to this is seeing some resemblance in their relationship, whether it be currently or previously, get ahead of it as soon as you can, because that's the way to do it. And it's the area that you should be investing in heavily. I would say double down in the area of relationships, because if you're one of those people that says the most important thing to you in your life is relationships, then what are you really doing? Don't lie. What are you really doing? And getting a coach is just a third party that allows you to see the patterns that you just mentioned and we talked about. And you don't, as people, we don't see them as patterns, right? We don't identify them. We identify them just as ways of being. It's just who we are. So that's what I would say starting with is get a coach, get some accountability around it, invest heavily in your relationships, and do what you did, Tim. If you're in the shit, you're in it, you're in it. If for you what it is, I do 10 breaths, 10 deep breaths. And a lot of times I'll do it before I say anything. I'll count to 10, not internally. I'll just stare at my wife, and doing that but just calms me down in general and allows me to get out of the situation. So there's a lot I'd love to share, and a lot I know you would too, and talk about, but in the interest of time, I would go back through this recording and write down a lot of the nuggets that are in here. There's a lot to be harvested from this conversation, and I appreciate you bringing it to the table.
Pleasure, and I appreciate everything you've shared, because I know the marriage that you and Erin have, and I say this in every show, the type of father you are and the lifestyle you've created, and it was a real honor. I was excited to share this question because I knew you'd have some amazing nuggets. So yeah, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next show.
See ya.